Hello there, I am Mr. Wizardly. Okay, so this is a quick video on how not to make a subclass for D&D, only this particular example is given to us from blessed Wizards of the Coast themselves, henceforth referred to as WotC. Now, as a disclaimer, I haven't looked through all of the new Player's Handbook Playtest 6 stuff just yet, so for all I know, maybe there's something hidden away in there that's even worse. But this one really did catch my eye as probably the worst designed official subclass that I've ever seen. Note that I don't mean the weakest subclass. That award probably goes to one of the options dwelling in the depths of the Skag, that is to say, the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, a forbidden tome that has long been lost to the mists of time due to how terrible most of the subclasses in it were. Of course, back then, WotC were still finding their feet, and we still didn't have a whole lot of choice, so any new subclasses were sort of welcome, even if they were bad. However, many years have passed since those golden halcyon days, and we've gotten used to a higher quality of product. Sort of. So when it comes to preparing for 6th edition, 1D&D, 5.5e, or I can't believe it's not 5th edition, whatever they want to call it, given how far we've come, this is actually a little bit shocking, and I hope that it will be immediately remedied. So, which subclass in particular am I going to pick on today? It's a monk subclass, the Warrior of the Hand, formerly known as Way of the Open Hand. We're now going to play a little game to see if you're a better designer than the poor, suffering, incredibly rushed intern who handed this subclass in to his boss on the back of a napkin on his first day of working at Wizards of the Coast, in between fetching the coffee for everyone else in the office. I have some sympathy for the author. This video is meant to be constructive criticism, but this subclass demonstrates a distinct lack of any sense of basic game design, and it is vital that whoever wrote this needs to never make this mistake again. Are you ready? You can pause the video when you think you've spotted the problem and write it down in the comments section below, and we'll see if you're right towards the end of the video. Here we go. Now, off to a good start. They have decided to straight up nerf open hand technique from what it was originally, because for some reason, this design team really love making you force your enemies to make 1,000,000 saving throws on your turn. When you hit a creature with one of the attacks granted by your flurry of blows, you can impose one of the following effects onto that target. Addle. The target must succeed on a Constitution saving throw, or it can't take reactions until the end of your next turn. Push. The target must succeed on a Strength saving throw, or you push it up to 15 feet away from yourself. And Topple. The target must succeed on a Dexterity saving throw, or it has the prone condition. Just as a quick note, I will admit that I have some small sympathy for adding in the saving throw to the Addle effect, on the grounds that the other two options basically gave you very similar benefits, but without the automatic success. However, that should just tell you that Addle should be removed entirely and replaced with something else instead. Let Push be the disengage option on offer, and give them something else cool to do. Moving on. At 6th level, you get Wholeness of Body. You gain the ability to heal yourself. As a bonus action, you can spend 1 discipline point. They've renamed Chi points, or key points, whichever you prefer, into discipline points now, for some reason. It really has no ring to it whatsoever. And this allows you to roll your martial arts die. You regain a number of hit points equal to the number rolled, plus your wisdom modifier, minimum of 1 hit point regained. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier, minimum of once, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. At 11th level, you get Fleet Step. You can easily stride out of harm's way. You can use Step of the Wind without spending any discipline points. And at 17th level, you get the nerfed version of Quivering Palm. TLDR, it deals force damage, which it probably should have done to begin with, but it doesn't reduce things to 0 hit points anymore. So it is significantly worse at a level when wizards are casting Wish. Basically, what you're doing in this version is that you're spending +2 Chi points for +20 average damage if they fail, or roughly around average damage if the enemy succeeds. Maybe a little bit less or more depending upon how well you can hit them. This is kind of a problem because Monk doesn't scale well into the later levels. They kind of need an X factor to stay relevant. But hey, don't worry your pretty little heads about it, because WotC haven't shown any sign of fixing the problems with high level play. As a result of that, most people probably won't bother leveling up high enough to use this feature, and if they do, they certainly won't be choosing this subclass anyway. I guess if no one is using our broken system, that means there's no problem, huh, WotC? That sure is how I like to think about my problems. If I don't look at them, they don't exist. Now, as scathing as my asides have been, I'm sorry, I just couldn't help myself. The rage and disappointment consume me. Those actually aren't the biggest problems that I can see with this subclass, so they're not what I'm asking you to spot. Have you noticed what I've noticed? The rookie game design mistake that a company like WotC really shouldn't be making at this late stage of development? Pause the video here, write your theory, and then hit play when you're ready to hear the answer. 3, 2, 1. There is no synergy here. None, nada, zilch. But you could forgive that. Sometimes you just want some cool thematic abilities, and while they don't directly interrelate with each other mechanically, they're still really flavorful and they give you enough utility that you can sort of make it work. But, if you've noticed, WotC went even further than giving this subclass no synergy. They made this subclass have anti-synergy. The 3rd level feature requires you to use Flurry of Blows, which is a bonus action. Your 6th level feature allows you to heal, which is a bonus action. Your 11th level feature allows you to use your Step of the Wind without spending discipline points, which is a bonus action. When you are using one of those things, you are actively not able to use the rest of your subclass features. All of them are directly competing against each other rather than working together. The 6th level feature in particular is just atrocious. When are you ever using a very bad second wind in combat over Flurry of Blows, Patient Defense for dodge, or the Dash Engage of Step of the Wind? The answer is never. And not only that, but they've also capped it so that you can't even make good use of it outside of combat. They goddamn capped this useless feature, and it even costs you your precious discipline points. At least before, it was once per long rest, and you got a big heal out of it. And it didn't actively drain your primary resource at a level when you were still trying to squeeze every last little bit of value out of it. And, at 11th level, sure, the Sanctuary effect of the original subclass was underwhelming to the extreme, don't get me wrong, but it was at least something that wasn't directly competing with your other effects. I guess if you're really charitable, you will technically use ever so slightly fewer discipline points because of the new 11th level feature. And so, because you'll have more of that resource to play with overall, that enables you to throw a few more points into your wholeness of body once you end the combat, right? If you could really stretch the definition, you could say that's sort of almost synergistic in that respect. But otherwise, this is just dire. There are a few things they could do to try and improve this. For instance, you could have it so that you gain temporary hit points equal to 2 plus half your monk level whenever you use Flurry of Blows or Patient Defense. And then you could have it so that the 11th level feature grants you some extra benefit when you use Patient Defense or Flurry of Blows, maybe one for each of them. That way, the subclass would have a particular play style, incentivizing you play it in a certain way. Have you ever heard of play styles before, WotC? Have you? Really? It really doesn't look like it to me with this disjointed patchwork approach that you seem to have right now. At least with the original version, as imperfect as it had a clear goal in mind. It was trying to make you into Ken from Fist of the North Star. That was the fantasy. This version, while debatably slightly more powerful in some regards-ish, doesn't even have that going for it. It has no creative vision, no fantasy that it is trying to evoke. While this is not a perfect analogy on my part, it almost feels to me as though a man from a remote tribe cut off from the rest of humanity stumbled across a fully functioning smartphone lying on the beach of his island, and so he decides to punch a hole through it and wear it like a necklace. Sure, good old Grug can wear it now, and for his own purposes, it's not that bad. It looks kinda snazzy. All of his friends are totally jealous. But he didn't spend any time really thinking about how it worked or what it was supposed to be. He just uncritically took a chunk out of it, threaded some string through it, and then called it a day. Do we applaud that kind of mentality? Is that how we should be approaching game design in the current year? I had some similar issues with how the Tavern Brawler feat was designed. It also lost sight of the fantasy that it was meant to be portraying. They just thought, ooh, I have an idea for a cool mechanic. I'll shove that in there, make the rest of it pointless or unusable, and call it a day. They're starting in the wrong place and working backwards, bending everything else to try and make the square peg fit into the round hole, rather than planting the seed in the right place and letting it grow naturally from there towards the fantasy that it is trying trying to fulfill. And while I'll admit that my own solution for Tavern Brawler at the time wasn't perfect, it should probably be more like this rather than giving you plus half your proficiency bonus in damage to unarmed strikes. That was a little bit overboard, especially for a class like Monk. However, in my defense, I was at least looking at it from the point of view of how the feat components worked together in service of a higher cause. The context of what you were doing is everything. Now, if you'll allow me to put my conspiracy hat on for a moment, there is one other possibility that I sometimes entertain. I've secretly had a theory, however unlikely it might be, that WotC has deliberately been mixing in some trash versions of their rules because they only have one or two things that they actually want to test out for each class or subclass or feat or race or spell or whatever it happens to be, and the rest is either placeholder rules or sabotaged versions of their rules so that when the actual player's handbook is released, you'll be more willing to slap down some money on the counter to get the real, improved, official version that works properly. However, if that's not the case, at the rate that we're going, we're probably in store for a little bit of a stinker. Maybe incrementally improved from old 5e in some regards, but completely wonky and discombobulated in others. Call it mycopium if you want. No, they're not actually incompetent. They're just releasing bad things on purpose. As something of a humble, low-level game designer myself, I went into this hoping that WotC would really start showing us what they were capable of. I want to learn from the best, and there are some changes that they're making that are legitimately good. But the more of these UAs that they release, and the closer to the deadline that we get, the more worried I'm becoming. Are they really doing this deliberately? They seem to be steadfastly pushing forward with a lot of subpar ideas that don't work properly. Weapon mastery. Maybe that'll leave some room in the industry for other companies to take a seat at the table and occupy a bigger niche. Maybe that's a good thing in the spirit of business competition. But I like it when things are the best that they can reasonably be. I'm not rooting for anyone to fail here. I do play D&D 5e, albeit in a heavily altered homebrew form, because frankly, the default version just doesn't cut it anymore. It hurts my soul just looking at it. I was therefore more invested than most in what a new edition could bring, and yet it seems to me like the more things change, the more they stay the same. Patch up the old holes, but create unnecessary new holes in the process. But what do you think? Am I being too harsh? Is my brain tiny and infected with the stupid? Or are you just as worried about the future of D&D as I am? Let me know in the comments down below. Well, that's all from me for now. This is Mr. Wizardly, signing off.